right. So hi, everyone. My name is Nadia Beizai, and I'm the manager of the Health Design Lab. I'm also sessional faculty in communication design at Emily Carr University. Kaylee Raber, who's the director of the lab, is also part of our team, but she's on mat leave, so she'll be back with our team in September.
Hi, everyone. My name is Otilia Spancelescu, and I'm the coordinator of the Health Design Lab.
And so first we want to acknowledge that we're currently hosting this event on the unceded and traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I acknowledge this because it's an important part of understanding our local history and context, and because where we live and where we come from is an important part of who we are. And who we are, it defines ourselves and is part of the work that we do. We want to make sure that we practice these land acknowledgements, not only as an act of recognition, but also as a reminder to attune ourselves to the lived and material impacts of colonial ideologies. And so for today, many of you had a chance to check out our lovely research assistants who have been at both ends of the rooms, showcasing some of the project materials that we have. And if you didn't have a chance to see that, we'll have some time at the end of the event to go say hi. They'll be coming up to present for each of the projects as well. So you'll have a double dose of each project team. And so for today, we have 7 projects that we're hoping to showcase, and each of the presentations will be about 10 minutes. And we have an intermission in between. If you didn't have a chance to get our color coordinated snacks over there where Priyanka is, make sure you do that during the break. And if there's any leftovers, please help yourself to more. All right. And so to get us started, Otilia and I are going to give a bit of an overview of the Health Design Lab. We're a research and design center here at Emily Carr University. It's actually so nice to be back here. Our last showcase we had in 2019, which was in person. And since the pandemic, we haven't really had a chance to bring everybody together and share some of our work with the local community. So welcome back, and we're excited to keep doing this on an annual basis at the end of our school term. And so in terms of what we do, we use participatory design methods to catalyze, support, and amplify initiatives that address complex health challenges. In the Health Design Lab, we don't focus on healthcare. Health is about community, culture, equity, agency, and so much more. Our health is determined not only by our genes and physical health, but also individual lifestyle factors, social and community factors, living conditions, and general socioeconomic and cultural conditions. So we're interested in projects that address health from a wide range of places. We think of ourselves as health plus rather than just healthcare. And it's about working with community groups and considering social determinants of health, not just physical health, hospitals, and understanding health from a medical lens alone. And so design is inherently collaborative, so we never work alone. So it's really nice to see a lot of our partners here in the room. We literally wouldn't be able to do projects without you. We think of ourselves as a dynamic team that adapts to meet our project and research needs. At our core, our design teams include a range of design students who work as RAs or research assistants. You'll see them kind of scattered throughout the room. And students and faculty who work in the Health Design Lab come from the Masters of Design program, which is an interdisciplinary program, or the interaction design stream, as well as the undergrad programs, which are communication design, interaction design, and industrial design. And the Health Design Lab is a place where those students from different programs have a chance to come together and work on projects. We often try to pair students from different disciplines together as a complementary skill set on projects. And the projects are led by the Health Design Lab staff, including myself, as well as some design faculty, John Hannon, shout out over here in the front row, and a few other sessional faculty as well. And we have design research associates who join us on specific projects. And we form these collaborative teams with our partners and communities they serve. Our partners are often nonprofits, health authorities, startups, or other academic institutions. And we strive to form a team where we're going to build capacity. And so we're not kind of dipping in and out. We're kind of allowing for our partners to really take that work beyond our involvement on the team.
Much of our work is about fostering new ideas, improving systems and services, and amplifying the voices and stories of people with lived experience. Though not exclusively focused on dementia and long-term care contexts, much of our current work is focused in these areas. Excited to connect excited to connect more with the work happening in community today and bring our work from long-term care homes.
Yeah, and we also work with our partners in Indigenous health as well as community health as well.
Our mindset, what we value and how we perceive ourselves and our role really informs the work and how we approach it. And also how our approach is unique from typical mindsets in health contexts, particularly amongst health professionals. First and foremost, we believe in lived experience and community-based knowledge is expertise and is valuable evidence that can inform decision-making. We see ourselves not as experts on any specific topic or subject matter within health, but as facilitators and collaborators that can support people with expertise in sharing that. And so this is where we draw on participatory design methods, and that at this point are probably somewhat familiar to you, but are still very much underutilized and unfamiliar in health and community work. Our work constantly seeks to explore the question, how can we amplify insights, ideas, and stories from people directly impacted? When we work with industry and community partners, our projects cover a variety of health and well-being topics and subjects. However, 3 areas of research coming out of the lab include research related to aging and dementia, the use of participatory design methods to address health challenges, and projects related to Indigenous health.
And so to us at the Health Design Lab, co-design is a practice and a process that includes people who will be impacted by the design process in that process. And that process includes the use of creative and participatory methods to facilitate dialogue, ideate and prototype methods, test and develop those, and create potential outcomes. So to us, interviewing people or having them involved in user testing is not completely co-design. We think of meeting with interdisciplinary groups as kind of an opportunity on that one side of the spectrum, and looking at co-design kind of on that farther end is something we're striving to do across projects. And so there are various levels of ways in which people can be included or participate in projects. One way is not necessarily better than the other. There's different forms of participation that are valid on different projects. In our view, co-design sits on the far end of this, where people are making decisions that impact, where the impact is in their hands. If we're including people at key phases, we kind of generally include that as, or call that as participation rather than co-design. And so co-design and participatory design teams tend to work with 3 parts: people with lived experience, professionals working with or for people with lived experience. Those are often in healthcare contexts or within community, or provocateurs, which is what we like to call ourselves as designers or researchers, and that's our kind of role on the project. So as provocateurs, we come to projects as outsiders, bringing our curiosity and willingness to learn with people we're working with. We bring ideas that from across other contexts, as well as reimagining how things could be. And we aim to challenge assumptions professionals may have through creative participatory approaches and work to shift power dynamics and give voice to all participants. And so as provocateurs, we use a range of participatory design methods and creative activities to support self-expression, storytelling, and dialogue. And lastly here, before we dive into our presentations, just wanted to share the role of making. So we find making a very useful and important tool when engaging with our co-designers. This is where we come in from an outside perspective and lens as designers, design researchers, and support people in sharing that knowledge. And so these are some quotes that I wanted to share from some literature that we have. So making is used to help co-design participants explore, reflect, and consider experiences, share and articulate and express them, and see how they compare and contrast with the experiences and perspectives of others. So we view making as a tool to level those power hierarchies and kind of draw out stories in a way that is empathetic and engaged to the user and allows them to kind of participate at the level that they want to at the time of a workshop or an engagement session. And so that's our kind of intro about design and co-design. If you're wondering where our lab is, it's not in this room. We're up on the 4th floor in the school, which is a kind of classroom space. And we have all of the materials that we normally have here kind of showcased up there. And all of our students have a chance to kind of check in and out of that space. And this is from a few years ago when we were running a pilot workshop in there. And here we go. And so each year we have about 8 to 10 projects and about 15 to 20 research assistants that join us throughout that. And they don't necessarily follow the academic year. It ends up being quite an overlap. So right now we have 7 projects happening. At times there's 3, at times there's more. Yeah, we're excited to share 7 of them with you today. And so now I'll maybe get us going on the first round of presentations. Before our intermission, we have 3 projects. You'll see me back up here for one of them. We'll talk about the health design class. But to start us off, I'll pass it off to our team, which is developing the emergent model of care on the Sunshine Coast, which now has a new name, which they will announce. So welcoming up Chelsea and Nada.
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Chelsea and this is Nada. And we're a part of the project now titled Who Cares? With the growing aging population, the persistent limitations of traditional institutional elder care settings, and the severe impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on elder care, there is a need to develop new approaches that reimagine the possibilities for how we live and care for our elders. Our key research question is how might we co-design an emergent model of care on the Sunshine Coast that engages elders and the general community in building a community they want to age into. The overall goal for this 3-year project is to create, implement, and evaluate an emergent model of care on the Sunshine Coast by using participatory arts-based practices to identify and build a strong community network centered on elders' assets and contributions. For year 1 of this project, we are working on establishing relationships with partners and colleagues on the Sunshine Coast, building a further sense of community in the area of care for older adults, and identifying the assets that the community has and can leverage to support this. And you might be wondering what an emergent model of care is. An emergent model of care is an adaptive and relational leadership model that accounts for constant change, relying on the strength of relationships and emphasizing critical connections over critical mass.
So this project expands on existing relationships. So we've got researchers from Carr, as well as Douglas College, and some different community partners and arts organizations, such as Deer Crossing, the Art Farm, and the Elder Care System on the Sunshine Coast.
So our project timeline follows this structure. In year 1, we'll be hosting community gatherings, identifying research sites, and building a community asset map. And in year 2, we'll be using the asset map to match community groups with elders to conduct the pilot projects. And in year 3, we'll be focusing on arts-based knowledge translation, where we'll be synthesizing our data and insights from the previous research phases to inform the creation of an emergent model of care.
So the objective of this project is to create, implement, and evaluate an emergent model of care on the lower Sunshine Coast. So we hope to support the shift from an institutional model of care to a more person-centered model of care. And so we're doing this by using participatory art-based practices to build systems centered on elders' assets and contributions. And so by developing an emergent model of care that is community-based, we seek to increase the Sunshine Coast's capacity to adapt, listen, and collaborate with elders and address their feelings and experiences with inclusion, belonging, support, and care. We hope to foster improved community connections and enhance programming and the relationship between isolated care sites and the community.
So the key activities for this project include holding community gatherings on the Sunshine Coast with elders, informal care partners and family members, local artists or designers, long-term care home staff, and professionals who work in the senior serving organizations in the nonprofit sector, and community group members. The purpose of these gatherings is to identify community assets such as values, neighborhoods, and places, who lives and works and plays there, how it is networked, how community members interact within the community, and what organizations and groups exist. This information is gathered through participatory activities, field notes, and by speaking with the attendees. We have also been hosting virtual lunch and learns where our project team meets for an hour at the end of each month to learn more about people, services, and resources available on the Sunshine Coast. The data will inform the creation of a community asset map, which will then be used to match community groups with elders for community pilot projects. And the purpose of these pilot projects is to start and maintain an ongoing and iterative arts-based exploration of the meaning and practice of community-based elder care on the Sunshine Coast. The project team will then synthesize the research data gathered from the previous phases to identify themes and insights. And the outcomes of this will be the development of an emergent model of care framework, which will be visualized using arts-based knowledge translation approaches, in addition to academic publications and presentations summarizing the project and our findings. And you might be wondering what arts-based knowledge translation is, and that is the process of using artistic approaches to communicate research findings to target audiences and reduce the knowledge to action gap.
We had our first activity in November. And so with our team, along with several members of our community, we were able to network on the Sunshine Coast and get together to participate in an afternoon-long workshop. And it was comprised of 2 activities. The workshop brought us all together for the first time with the intent to look at how we can co-design an emergent model of care for elders on the Sunshine Coast. So during this gathering, 2 activities took place. The first being where we identified values as relating to places, people, resources, and organizations that contribute to create a sense of community. And individually, we worked on creating a community map to illustrate these values. And in the second activity, we shared a story of a time in our life where we were engaged in 6 emergent principles, being adaptability, co-creation, curiosity, presence, patience, and intention. Afterwards, we further unpacked the meaning, these principles and values by using various mixed media materials, and we were able to visually represent them through collage making.
And then on February 8th, we hosted our second gathering on the Sunshine Coast. And during this gathering, attendees were asked to complete 3 activities, the first being a set of question cards that related to groups people belong to. The second was a mapping activity where we asked everyone to mark places of significance and the groups they belong to on the map of the Southern Sunshine Coast. And then in the third activity, we asked attendees to write their hopes for the future and then read them aloud as a group.
So as Chelsea mentioned earlier, we have a few lunch and learn talks that we do where we bring in someone from the Sunshine Coast community and they're able to share their knowledge about the community and different resources that are available there. So far, we've had 3 of these. The first speaker was Mary Carroll, who's the Seniors Planning Manager from the Sunshine Coast Resource Center. And then the second was Nina Strauss, who is the occupational therapist with Vancouver Coastal Health. And the third was Marlene Symbolist, who is the community engagement coordinator of the Pender Harbor Health Center.
And as RAs, we have learned many things from working on this project, but our key learnings have been learning how to develop a community asset map using co-design practices, synthesizing a large amount of data into a concise data visualizations, that the frequency of data is not as important when working with smaller groups, especially when it comes to community assets that people have a personal connection to. Also, the Sunshine Coast has a strong sense of community. Being a smaller community and relatively isolated, there's an opportunity for the connections made between these groups and elders to last long term. And also, a location may seem irrelevant to project objectives from an outsider's perspective, but upon further inspection and after speaking with community members could be deemed to be an important site of community engagement and connection. For example, the laundromat and the IGA were named as some of the popular places for the community to gather.
In terms of the visual identity of the project, it's still very much in the early stages, since the name is quite new. But these are some of the explorations we've been doing, and we hope to highlight the feeling of isolation that the elders experience on the coast, as well as emphasize the geographical location of the project by using some colors and graphics that are inspired by the nature of the Sunshine Coast.
And then the next steps in the project are to conduct more community workshops and to synthesize the data, refine the asset map and create a final version of it, identify community collaborators and begin recruitment for phase 2, and connect community groups with elders to create the pilot project pairings. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea and Nada, and we'll do the questions at the end of each cluster, so after the next two. Right. This. I'm going to share a little bit about DESN 319, which is the health design class that I'm currently teaching at Carr University, which sits within the undergrad design program here at Carr. We're looking to kind of, through this project, answer how might we leverage existing resources in the community to create meaningful opportunities for engagement and storytelling for people living in long-term care. And the thought was, how do we have design students where we connect them with long-term care, and how can we bring them together over the course of a semester? And John Hannon and Kaylee Raber started this initiative, I want to say in 2018 now. And so this class is the 7th iteration of that. John has taught about 3, Kaylee's taught a couple, and I'm teaching it this term for the first time, and have supported the kind of research behind the scenes for a few years. The intention of the class is to create an infrastructure for meaningful intergenerational exchange and social interaction between students and people living in long-term care, so that through that connection, the outcomes from the class could be used to strengthen relationships between staff members, rec therapy, other people living in long-term care as an opportunity for connection. The program gives a voice to people living in long-term care and really allows them to kind of think about creative and emotional expression differently from current programming that exists in that space. And so where this kind of started off was actually before our 7 iterations. It started off in Zurich, Switzerland, with Carolyn Kirchhoff as her master's thesis, which explored the role of a graphic designer and how it plays in the context of long-term care, and really helped residents write stories and turn stories into publications called Zeitgeist, which was the original kind of inspo for the project. And the idea was to create a kind of newspaper that was sold within the community that had different iterations, and not only focus on the past or previous stories, but really kind of generating new knowledge. One of our favorite ones is this robot that the residents kind of put on, and kind of imagining what they could do if they had different powers. And so really kind of going away from someone being at the end of their life and not able to contribute anymore, but really kind of revitalizing that there's a lot of knowledge still to share, and how can we support in elevating that and sharing it. And so these are from the original iteration, and were shared with the public. And then at some point years ago, John and Kaylee had met with Carolyn, which was the inspiration for our version, which is called Perspectives. And so we decided to branch off and create a new name. And this is where we're at kind of now. And we know that people have stories. We know the stories matter to them, to their family, and the care they receive. And how do we listen to those stories? So the job is first to listen, and second to capture and share those stories. So that's part of the class. And we know that stories can involve, engage, create dialogue, share visions and desires, envision scenarios, and promote ideas. And that's part of the objective for the class. And so how it's structured is we have 6 sessions throughout the term where the students actually, in this iteration, because of COVID, we're kind of still in that phase. We're meeting over Zoom, and it created an interesting scenario for us where we didn't actually have to engage with a care home that was in Vancouver within bus or driving distance. And so actually it worked out quite nicely for our Sunshine Coast project. We're doing a lot of things over there in the context of long-term care. So we're actually engaging with Totem Lodge, and they're a ferry ride away. And I actually haven't been to the care home, but I've been online with them many times. And through the multiple projects that we have, it's an opportunity to reimagine how we think care could be offered, delivered within the community. And this project kind of being one example of that. And so why are we doing this project? Social isolation is kind of prominent in long-term care. People are away from their families, from their friends, familiar places, and people they're used to connecting to. Often there's a removal of personal identity, in part because they may not remember large parts of it, but also because key parts of their identity are taken away, transitioning into long-term care. So there's limited opportunities for creative expression and meaningful engagement through their daily activities. And so we were thinking, how can we bring our students who are, primed and ready to share their creative kind of talents and use that opportunity to have real clients where they could work with people living in long-term care and have that really mutually beneficial kind of relationship. And then this idea of narrative foreclosure. And so that's what I mentioned earlier around, people at the end of their lives still have stories to share, wealth of knowledge of, between 50 and 100 years of information that they're just striving to share with us. And so having an opportunity to elevate that and share that not only with their family, but the community and through the students is one way we're trying to connect through this project. And so we know that people receive better care when staff know their stories. And so we're creating methods to get to know people are often limited. And we want to use design to create a way to get to know people and share those stories. And so the assignment within the class, this is straight from the course outline, was in teams. We asked students to design a series of creative activities to get to know their co-designers, so people living in long-term care, gather stories and experiences they wish to share, and that being a key part of it. And now I'm going to share a little bit of within the class what that looked like. So this was for the Zoom specific setting. So imagine students joining from home, 3 of them in a group. They're meeting virtually with Totem Lodge, where a staff member is helping them out. They have 2 kind of co-designers joining from a room on an iPad, and they're all seeing each other through the screen. And so that's the kind of scenario for the engagement in order to kind of support the physical safety. And so students got creative, noting that they couldn't kind of engage, touch anybody, hand to hand, or send kind of kits between the Sunshine Coast and Vancouver. And so these are some examples from the class. Figma was a very popular tool this term. And so this was an activity where students used a spinner exercise and had color matching photos, where someone would just have to pick a number and say that out loud. They would spin the dial and then it would guide them to one of these boards. And then the idea was from those boards, there were photos that related to a specific topic or category. And it was a way to prompt kind of further dialogue. And then off to the side, one key thing we had through the class is it's not only about gathering info, but making sure that you're sharing back as well. So the students in this group made sure that they were playing the kind of spinner bingo activity as well, and shared a little bit about themselves as they kind of expected to hear stories on their side. And then this was another kind of activity that was asking kind of a would you rather or what do you prefer, and asking, do you wake up early or do you wake up late? And then asking follow-up questions that are related to that. Are you a night owl? Are you someone that wakes up early? Like, were you, someone who's a pilot? It related back to lots of different stories that came out from it, from a very simple starting question. And so students spent kind of 2 to 3 classes getting to know each other with the residents in long-term care, and then transition to kind of their big assignment for the class, which was to creatively present their stories in a unique format appropriate to the content for sharing with others. And you'll see right beside Zoe over there, there's some outputs from the class that were just done on Monday, actually, or last Friday, they handed them in. And so the 6 groups got theirs, and we had a carrier pigeon, one of our close colleagues who supported with taking the outcomes to the care home so that they could open it live while we had our last class and have that reveal and celebration. And so what the development from the final outcomes and those creative activities look like was kind of gathering feedback on their final pieces. So over Zoom, it looked like this, creating kind of layouts and giving kind of a high level overview of what the projects would look like and sketches of what a pop-up book would be. For another group here, they did a series of postcards that looked like a passport. And this was them kind of showing and confirming with their groups to make sure that the content was okay. Normally, when we did this class in person, we would have people with pens and Sharpies coming out and kind of making sure and have an opportunity to connect. But online, it was like asking people through Zoom just to zoom in and read and confirm that their stories were represented in the right way. And then this was another group, Steen's here in the room as well. They did a radio show, which was pretty exciting. And this one was a combo of audio and visual content, and really kind of brought the co-designers back to a time where, they would listen to the radio. They would hear sports events and, wrestling fights over the radio and in like very descriptive language. And so to bring that kind of era back, the students in this group really became radio hosts and told the stories back through that, with some opportunity to use magnets to elicit kind of scenes that were described in the stories as well. And then we have this group as well. Sean's here from this group, and they did a garden box, and also Aaron as well. And this group was looking at how could they create a growing together box that invited their co-designers to plant some seeds, which had information about their stories on the plant tags, and invited kind of staff and other people within the care home to learn a little bit about them through growing. And so this is the final outcomes for the class. And so the idea was, these are all shared within the care home, and we hope that there'll be lasting kind of legacies for the family. In past years, often people living in long-term care aren't there for that long. And so this is a memory for their grandkids, for their family, for their friends to kind of remember them by. It's kind of a project that put a lot of love into it throughout that term, and a legacy kind of people living in long-term care. And so through this project and through the other project on the Sunshine Coast, we're really looking at how can we elevate stories, how can we look at care a little bit differently and engage students, designers, journalists, other people in the community in kind of being part of that care journey. All right, and so that's it for that project. And I'll now hand it over to our recovery and renewal co-design team. And so welcoming up Larina and Shraddha.
Hi, everyone. I am Shraddha Kumbhar, and I'm currently finishing my master's in interaction design. And this is Larina Kumar. She's doing her bachelor's in industrial design. And we have been working with the Health Design Lab for the past 7 months as research assistants. Today, we are going to present recovery and renewal of participation in healthcare change. This project seeks to learn from health designers internationally about how co-design practices in health evolved, pivoted, and changed during the pandemic, so that we can learn from these experiences to inform the future of co-design practices. Over the last 10 years, health systems and services have increased the use of co-design practices to engage stakeholders, which relies on close engagement with people and health providers. The pandemic hindered this close engagement and led to rapid adaptations in co-design practices and techniques. This has been a focus throughout the project.
Recovery and Renewal is a transnational project supported by National Frontiers in Research Fund Program of Canada, and is a collaboration between 6 labs, as you can see up there, and organizations led by the Health Design Studio at OCAD University.
As a full team, so far, we have planned and facilitated 6 virtual workshops, and now shifting into synthesis of the data from those sessions, which will be followed by academic journal writing on various topics, which will be elaborated in the following slides. Concurrently, we are also researching on co-design and healthcare timeline for an academic paper.
This project has been designed with the following objectives in mind. Firstly, to capture the experiences and adaptations that came about in co-design in healthcare projects during the pandemic. Second, to address issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in post-COVID recovery. And lastly, since co-design is such an important tool in a researcher or designer's arsenal, we aim to develop capacity building resources for emerging co-design techniques through a community of practice and formal academic venues.
We approach this project using realist methods. The realist approach focuses on understanding the mechanism at work behind different interventions. It involves identifying these mechanisms and exploring the conditions of their use. This is done through looking for context, mechanism, and outcomes in the data. The context refers to the background factors required for mechanism to take place. The mechanism is the method or methods used to achieve the outcome, and the outcome is the end result.
So the first set of activities we did were the workshops. There were 6 virtual workshops, each being 4 hours long. Through these workshops, we engaged an international group of individuals in the field of co-design to share their insights on the projects they've been involved in. These included participants across time zones from Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Nepal. During the first half of the workshop, we posed questions like the details of their project, the experiences of their teams throughout the pandemic, and the value of co-design for their teams.
In the second half, we transitioned to asking participants where they would situate their work based on equity, diversity, and inclusion cards shown right now. The table came out of our team's previous research, which breaks down the EDI into 7 main categories represented by the yellow cards, and further subcategorized into the gray cards. Next, we dive deeper into understanding their team's gains and losses during the pandemic using these EDI cards as a framework.
We did this using with a couple of activities. The first prompted participants to vote on the top 3 yellow EDI cards that were negatively impacted by the pandemic in their projects, followed by voting on the cards that were positively impacted.
Next, to capture more detail, we asked participants to choose 1 or 2 gray cards and reflect on how pandemic had negatively and positively impacted this specific area in terms of tools and resources, people and skills, and processes and thinking. All these insights were shared among the group to enable collective learning. An interesting insight to share with you at this point is how participants interpreted the same design principles differently based on the context of their projects. For example, safety, one of the 7 EDI cards, was interpreted both as gain and a loss while facilitating using zone.
Having conducted the workshops, we moved into the next phase of our project, the synthesis. In February, our team traveled to OCAD University in Toronto for a week-long intensive, during which we focused on synthesizing data from the 6 virtual workshops, as well as literature sources. Various coding methods were explored and tested to see which best captured the research data.
We finalized on coding our data through the lens of the 7 EDI principles, that is accessibility, safety, capacity building and empowerment, timeline and pace, democratic practices, creativity and making, context-based and community-specific knowledge. We are currently in the process of coding all the data.
Simultaneously, we launched and have been building an online community of practice as a collaborative platform to share personal knowledge, information, experiences, and practices in co-design and health. It is a platform for design practitioners from diverse geographies and perspectives to come together to share their experiences, build connections, and access resources. At this point, we would like to invite any of you who are interested and have been practicing co-design to join our community. You can join by scanning the QR code in the top right corner, and we just give you a minute to do that.
Parallelly, we have also been researching to write a journal article on co-design in healthcare in a timeline. It is to provide context to the field of co-design theory and its evolution throughout the decades, along with its overlap with healthcare systems.
Some of our key learnings as research assistants on this project have been, we learned how to navigate a workshop that requires participants to write as well as speak online. Moreover, we realized the amount of time and consideration that has to be given for selecting the right methods for synthesis. We had to try multiple methods and iterate accordingly so that we were best able to capture all the valuable data. It also made us realize how beneficial it is to have a group of designers and researchers discussing how to code together. Lastly, we learned the difference between applied research using co-design techniques and research meant to add to co-design theory as a field. Moving forward, we will continue with our synthesis using Atlas TI and analysis software and building the community of practice by posting practical insights and tactical questions. For example, what icebreaking activities have worked for you during virtual facilitation? Have you used pre-workshop materials and how did it go, and etc. Further, we plan to reach out to the community using short, unstructured sessions and webinars on key topics to fill any gaps. We will also be shifting into writing multiple academic articles, including a paper for each EDI principle that explores co-design gains and losses in the context of the pandemic. We're excited to continue working on this project and contributing to the community, and we thank you for your time today.
All right, so thanks everyone. We're just about ready for our next half of the evening. We have 4 projects for you. So our Supporting the Stillbirth Journey project, our Rehab and Recovery Strategy for Stroke, Spinal Cord Injury, and Brain Injury, our Decolonizing the Healthcare System through Cultural Connections, and Challenging Stigma through Storytelling. And so first up, I would like to invite our Supporting the Stillbirth Journey team. We have Eden, Luna, and Camilla.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kamala. I'm in my 3rd year of industrial design. I use she, her pronouns. So Eden, Luna, and I have been on this project supporting the Stillbirth Journey for 6 months now with our HDL team and our partners at the BC Women's Hospital.
Yeah, thank you, Camila. So I'm Eden Luna. I'm a first-time multidisciplinary designer in the master program. And so we've been working around stillbirth, and stillbirth is something that happens to about like 3,000 people per year in Canada. And we've used a definition in this project of the loss of a baby in utero at delivery after 20 weeks. So we have been diving into the context of stillbirth in relationship to healthcare, of course, and how the journey can be improved using workshops with people with lived experience. Thanks to our partner, which is BC Women's Hospital. Yeah, and just to, so we've been working together with them, really hand in hand, having weekly meeting, and it has been very helpful because BC Women has been able to give us the limitation and reality part, and we as designers and research assistants, we have been informing on the creative methods, and just playing around like what's actually happening and what could happen has been, very enriching. And the Butterfly Run has been our funder for the project.
This project originated from a recognition by the BC Women's Hospital that they don't currently offer a resource for those who go through the experience of stillbirth in a hospital setting. This is a starting point of our quality improvement project to try to understand what we need to do as our first step. The key objective of this project is co-designing a patient-facing resource that supports people who have experienced stillbirth from diagnosis to discharge from the hospital. To do this, we ran 2 workshops, synthesized the data, and put together a summary slide deck for hospital stakeholders about what we heard and what are the opportunities for improvement in the hospital stillbirth journey. So this co-design initiative involves co-facilitating a series of workshops with our partners at BC Women's Hospital to engage individuals with lived experience of stillbirth in identifying their needs and experiences. This included active participation of stakeholders and people with lived experience of stillbirth, making it highly iterative process and collaborative. This process is aimed at creating a resource that is effective, easy to use, and it elevates the voices of people with the lived experience. We held 2 3-hour-long workshops to better understand this experience and with our findings, help inform our resource. We had 12 participants in the in-person workshop and 11 participants in the online one.
And to give you an idea of this big timeline, just an overview of how it has been evolving. So we've been working in 3 main times. The first one was really about discovering the topic and understanding the reality, which includes the workshops. And then we have been defining, that's where we are right now, like towards the end of it, really defining where we are heading and what can be improved. And the last part is really about delivering and making a resource, which is still very undefined. And as you can see, all of those times have been heading towards focus moments, so the workshops, or the final resource and presentation.
In order to gather valuable insight from our participants, we dedicated our initial few months to meticulously crafting engaging materials that served as an entry point for meaningful conversations later on. During this ideation phase, we thoughtfully curated a harmonious, earthy tone and designed 4 activities that would serve as conduits for our participants to share their personal experience. With each activity, our intention was to be as minimally prescriptive as possible, allowing the participants to freely express their thoughts and emotions while avoiding potential trigger language. We placed a strong emphasis on fostering a supportive environment grounded in empathy and understanding. After individual engagement with the materials, participants had the opportunity to partake in table discussions to further explore and share their experience. The workshop began with a unique and personalized approach that encouraged participants to share their personal stories in a reflective journal, allowing them to connect with their emotions. So some of the prompts in this journal were, one thing that I clearly remember is some words that I did not want to hear. I felt cared for when. A piece of advice I would give to a healthcare professional, a piece of advice I would give to a person experiencing stillbirth, and something that was not helpful. The journals were designed in as a reflective tool to help participants recollect significant moments and experiences related to stillbirth. The prompt them to delve deeper into their emotions and thoughts slowly. This approach proved to be highly effective, and it provided an easy to interact with tool, allowing participants to take their time to process their emotions and thoughts independently before coming together and discussing them collectively. It created a safe space for participants to reflect and share their experiences without feeling triggered or overwhelmed.
And to continue, the second activity, activity 1.2, was really focusing on trying to gather resources, even though it might not seem like it from this first glance. It was really about asking participants to focus on what was comfortable and uncomfortable through the use of the 5 senses to kind of connect them to their body and ground them into what did you actually experience that wasn't emotional. And just, what did you see? What did you hear? What can you remember that is very like physical and not related to your emotions? And it was like an indirect way of asking them, okay, what are the things that helped you? Without them being like, oh, I don't know. It's more like, okay, focus on your senses. And one insight that I think is worth sharing is that it was very efficient in focusing in this non-emotional layer and really abstract it to really focus on what should be improved and avoided in the space of the hospital.
The prompt for this activity was reflect on your personal journey through the hospital system after experiencing stillbirth. What were some key moments or highlights in this experience from your initial consultation to your last interaction with the hospital? To support participants in taking an open-ended, non-linear approach to this activity, we provided them with a sticker pack. This pack included a variety of stickers that they could use to indicate their feelings. So for example, on the top right corner, we have a heart that could indicate a positive emotion, a feeling of being loved. And then the scribble could indicate a negative emotion. And we have a house there to indicate home, and then a very generalized building below and a hospital sticker. We also added some very descriptive words in there, such as pathology, partner, family, friends, and some blank ones that they could fill in themselves. The purpose of this activity was not to create a step-by-step documentation of their journey, as we understand that every individual's journey is unique, but to allow them to decide the direction themselves. Instead, we facilitated a discussion on the key moments or highlights in their journey, as well as their hopes and wishes in the future. This allowed for a more nuanced discussion and helped us to better understand the needs and perspectives of those who have experienced stillbirth. If we were to do something different, we would definitely not include the stickers that we made on our in-house circuit machine and probably outsource them because we did not imagine the technicalities it involves. Yeah, over to Eden.
And to continue this activity towards activity 2.2, like the idea was really to go from this personal journey that they have been making toward a speculative and hopeful journey. So we asked them to fill out this I wish statement, well, like the round, the circle, the yellow circle that you can see. Toward this idea of, okay, what do you wish for? And to abstract it from this personal journey and then share it in a space, which is this big page on the table, which was titled Improving Future Journeys at BC Women's Hospital and Health Center, sorry. So the idea was to go from a wish to actually how to involve people and goals. So we had those blocks that you can see. One was for what do you need? And the other one was who is involved. So the idea was to cluster the blocks and the circles to together create an actual, like almost actionable reality, and to go from a personal journey to possibilities. And also we wanted to finish the workshop with this activity to end on something that was hopeful and not heavy, as the topic is. And one last thing is that, as you can see, this workshop was quite long, so we were not able to go towards the end of it all the times. Some tables were able to, but some were not. So it's very important as part of the learnings, I think, to make sure that you don't do too much and are able to navigate through everything that you want. Something also very important was when working in a space that has a potential to trigger emotional responses, it is important to approach the situation with a high degree of empathy and sensitivity. So that's what we have been trying to do through all these workshops. And also we really learned how to work with a healthcare setting, and including how to navigate complex healthcare systems and work with the healthcare professionals. And I would add to that the importance of having multiple eyes and brains on something that is so complex and embedded in system is essential. So working with BC Women has been very great for that, because they have been there with us weekly. And for example, like right now we are working on the synthesis, and sometimes we encounter things and in my brain I'm like, oh, this could be just improved in this one step, when actually when I talk with them there are actually 10 more things that I'm not aware of. So just working hand in hand is very, very important, especially with co-design.
So currently we're collaborating with the BC Women's team to analyze the data using reflexive thematic analysis. This process requires a delicate balance between providing sufficient context without overwhelming the data with too many details involved. So after analyzing the workshop findings, our team plans to use the insights from the slide to form a slide deck for hospital stakeholders around the opportunities that currently exist to improve the in-hospital stillbirth journey experience, as well as co-create a resource that is patient-facing and can be implemented in BC Women's Hospital. We recognize that this is just one step in a long journey, but we're deeply proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey everyone.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Blair. I'm a first-year master student at Carr in the major of interaction design. So I am one of the RA on this project, and we also have a new RA, Mark, who's going to be joining our team. And we also had another RA, Yutan. He is currently visiting his family in South Africa, so he won't be joining us today. So today I would like to share with you the project Gathering Perspectives. Okay. So Gathering Perspective, part of the BC Rehab and Recovery Strategy, is a project collaborated by 8 health and community organizations in British Columbia. So we have heart and stroke, spinal cord injury, BC, GF Strong, and also we also have like a lot of people with experience participants. So every year in BC, thousands of people experience a stroke, brain injury, or spinal cord injury, adding to many thousands more who are already living with these diagnoses. So all 3 conditions are lifelong conditions that have a direct effect on the function of the brain and the central nervous system. While people can regain some of that functioning or adapt to their new circumstances, the current rehab and recovery system in BC does not make it easy. Currently, many people feel that the system is not providing the care and support they need in order for them to move forward with their lives. So the goal for this project is to build the case for a client-centered, systematic, integrated, and province-wide approach to rehab and recovery service, while pressing that case to all levels of relevant decision makers in the province over the next 2 years and beyond. So here is the timeline overview of the key things we did in this project. So over the past year and 4 months, our team planned and hosted multiple workshops and participants who have experience with the 3 diagnoses. We analyzed data and generated key themes collectively with the steering committee members. We wrote a report that contains the insights and perspectives of our participants. And currently we are in phase 2, where we are drafting a validation and recommendation survey. So to better understand the gaps in the current healthcare system and the needs of the people, we brought together individuals and families with lived experience with stroke, spinal cord injury, and brain injury, as well as healthcare professionals and researchers working related to these 3 diagnosis patient groups to share with us their insights and experience. So as a team, we hosted 12 workshops, 6 with people with lived experience and 6 with researchers and professionals. Each workshop lasted about 1.5 hours. These workshops were hosted remotely over Zoom so that we could reach a more geographically diverse group of people across all healthcare regions. In total, we were able to invite 50 participants and 16 facilitators to join the workshop, and we collected over 4,600 individual notes. So with the huge amount of notes we gathered from the workshop, our team then moved on to the process of reflexive thematic analysis. This method is an accessible and theoretically flexible approach for analyzing mass amount of qualitative data. In total, we have 24 workshop boards with both people with experience and professional and researchers participants. Our team's first step is to familiarize ourselves with each node on the workshop boards. Familiarizing is a process of reading and understanding all the notes that were captured from participants. This step not only helps our team to recall key insights from the workshop, but also helps identify similar notes to be grouped together for the next step. Our next step is to generate initial codes. This step requires us to read through the notes one more time and quickly summarize the notes in a few phrases. One of the methods we use is to color label notes that share the same code. Another way we did was to identify groups of code that map out the connections later. Next, we constructed prototype themes. This is a process of merging similar codes, specifying the gaps and needs in each statement that we identified, as well as pointing out the direction of the data we collected. So lastly, our team came together to review and map out potential themes. This is the refining stage where we pinpointed the major categories, finding relations across each theme, as well as merging and breaking down themes. After 5 rounds of refinement, we came up with this final theme, which are captured in this visualized diagram. So the final themes demonstrated an overview of what we heard from our 50+ workshop participants. We identified 5 key areas on the current rehab and recovery experience and 4 future consideration questions. So the 5 sections explain the highest priority of the rehab and recovery needs in BC through the lens of participants. These priorities are: number 1, personnel challenges affect consistency of care. Number 2, geographical disparity influence quality of care. Number 3, financial support limitations amplify impacts of injuries. Number 4, support gaps strain the lifelong recovery journey. And number 5, service availability declines as age and complexity of diagnosis increase. We also had, for future considerations, explore ideas that came out from the workshop. These are not all of the possibility that exists, but what we heard from the participants. So we have, how do we think we can enhance provincial networks for professional learning and support? How can we increase long-term support over the lifespan by investing in community-based programming and support? How can we enhance coordination of services and information across the continuum of care and geographical regions? And how can we formally integrate growth for people with lived experience through the recovery journey? The content that were gathered from the workshops were summarized into an insight report called The Gathering Perspective. The report maps out the experience of a group of people who are directly involved in the current rehab and recovery system in BC, identify key challenges and obstacles encountered by both professionals and people with lived experience throughout the recovery journey, as well as highlights ideas that could inform a province-wide strategy. And currently our team are drafting and refining an online survey that summarizes the Gathering Perspective report, while invite people with lived experience and healthcare professionals and researchers to respond and provide their feedback to a list of policy recommendations. We hope to send the survey in late April and to reach a diverse group of audience across all healthcare regions in BC. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Blair. Now, I'm going to invite up our next team for decolonizing the healthcare system through cultural connections. So Erin and Zoe.
Anine Buzu, Wabashkami Gwen, Indigenous Cause, Zoe Laycock, Indigenous Cause. I am a Master of Fine Arts student here at Emily Carr. I'm also a research assistant on this project, and I am Anishinaabe Métis with my family coming from Ebb and Flow, Manitoba. Yes.
Hi, I'm Erin Finnerty, and I'm a communication design major, getting my bachelor's soon. I'm part Assiniboine and part Chippewa. My family comes from Montana.
Well, so our Cultural Connections project is an Indigenous community-led approach to cultural safety education that seeks to decolonize the healthcare system through making and dialogue. The questions we are raising through this project is how might we develop an immersive approach to cultural safety education that utilizes Indigenous methodologies to promote dialogue and awareness of injustices and racism towards Indigenous peoples, while creating an environment that is conducive to building community connections. What a question.
So this project was a collaborative project between the Aboriginal Gathering Place, the Health Design Lab at Emily Carr University, and the Director of Aboriginal Education at the College of New Caledonia. Within these groups, we have Indigenous knowledge holders, healers, local cultural advisors, doctors, researchers, designers, artists, documenters, and health science students and Indigenous students.
So I joined the team in October of 2020. The team had hosted a workshop, their first workshop in person in Prince George, just before the big lockdown in early 2020. And we were able to host two more fully remote workshops over Zoom with the support from the Aboriginal Gathering Place, putting together and sending up material practice kits, and the College of New Caledonia for with technical support and the space. Then finally, after rescheduling and careful consideration, hosting our latest workshop in person in Prince George in April of 2022. After these 4 pilot workshops, we hosted an exhibition in April of 2022 that we'll speak more to in a few moments. This project is ongoing. We continue to speak at a variety of conferences and gatherings, including presenting our research paper on the project to the Design Research Society last summer in Bilbao in 2022. That was last year.
So the overall goal of this project has been to shift how the next generation of healthcare professionals view Indigenous health and support an environment where Indigenous peoples can consistently access culturally safe and appropriate care, feel comfortable using the healthcare system as part of their health management, and experience better health outcomes. Through our collaboration over the past 3 years, we have developed, tested, and refined a cultural safety education workshop model, referred to as cultural connections. A key aspect of the workshop model has been prioritization of local Indigenous protocols and inclusion of local Indigenous artists, knowledge holders, and cultural advisor workshop facilitators, supported by the designers, design research, and a physician. Through a combination of activities that are grounded in Indigenous methodologies, the workshop aims to create a culturally immersive space for the purpose of sharing, learning, and mutual benefit.
So the cultural safety training model takes the form of a 3-day workshop. The workshop invites approximately 10 health science students and a similar number of Indigenous community members and students to come together in a shared space. Knowledge sharing with a gentle hands approach. The approach blends hard-hitting conversations with making drums, rattles, beadwork, moose hair tufting, and other local Indigenous material practices. Indigenous ways of knowing and being are a foundational aspect to this workshop model. The approach aims to flatten power hierarchies and create space for meaningful connection and shared learning through conversation and through making. It's looking at how centering Indigenous voices, experiences, and practices can enable change within healthcare systems or make space for alternative systems to emerge. The concepts of embodied learning, brave spaces, and safe spaces are inherent within Indigenous knowledge sharing, and our team took special care to shape those kinds of learning environments.
So within these workshops, there were 3 important concepts that was hosting and convening, sharing circles, and making. So hosting and convening highlighted the importance of culture, tradition, and local protocol as the point of entry into conversation, opening up a safe space for discussion by setting the tone for the room. Bringing Indigenous people and non-Indigenous participants together to allow for perspectives, experiences, and worldview to be categorized in place by providing context and faces to stories and sharing. The sharing circles are structured periods of dialogue led by our Indigenous hosts and team members. Sitting in a circle, each member of the group would choose to speak and listen. These sharing circles created spaces where participants felt safe and welcome to be open and vulnerable, and brave enough to share their emotional responses within the group. Participants were able to reflect on how the learning felt for them emotionally, physically, and what allyship and advocacy could look like for them as individuals and health practitioners. And the making offered participants space to rest and reflect on the sharing circles, creating meaningful conditions for introspection, learning, unlearning, and healing. Making also created an environment that stimulated dialogue. Participants connected and learned from Indigenous artists and their peers through formal and informal modes. Further, it offered tangible connections to land and traditional Indigenous practices and knowledge holders from their communities. Through learning the skills to create using traditional materials, the participants could feel the teachings, their connections to First Nations culture, and their relationship with the land.
So we were able to, I'm gonna inevitably kick it again. So we had an exhibition opening through a lot of the qualitative data that we gathered over the workshop periods. We were able to synthesize that and to basically create an exhibition in Prince George at the Two Rivers Gallery. It took place in August of last year and it ran until September 24th. We invited past participants, artists, and community members to the opening, and it was a really incredible evening. The exhibition was curated by myself, Zoe Laycock, and co-designed by Erin Finnerty, and contained a variety of objects made by participants during the workshops, including drums, rattles, beadwork, and tufting, as well as showcasing work by local Indigenous artists, photographs and meaningful large-scale text panels and images that were designed by Erin, as well as large-scale place-based textile works by myself.
We also needed to have a beautiful way to take what we had learned and bring this rich, vast knowledge to a broader audience. The publication we created was able to capture some of the conversation, context, and magic that occurred during the workshops. Though it's impossible to fully describe the deep interpersonal and community connections that occurred throughout these workshops, in the publication, designed by myself and Jean Chisholm, featured essays, poems, and outlines of the workshops and the learning that took place in a really beautiful and accessible way.
Sorry, the Cultural Connections workshops facilitated connection to local Indigenous culture and community. Participants built relationships with local Indigenous elders, artists, and students through both structured and unstructured conversations and activities. These kinds of culturally immersive experiences shifted away from a deficit-based perspective of Indigenous culture, and Indigenous participants were able to share a spectrum of themselves and their stories as present, embedded, and engaged members of their nations and communities. The learning came from hearing each other's lived experiences and perspectives, and these face-to-face group conversations created a learning space that didn't feel detached, like a traditional lecture-based learning, but rather built a sense of trust and accountability between members or participants. Engagement with Indigenous peoples as people and not necessarily as patients supported relationships building with mutual respect and equality. The workshops demonstrated the complexity of Indigenous practices, materials, relationships, and the need to do this learning in a supportive and relational way. We talked in various ways about challenging the notion that Indigenous makings are simple crafts or that racist attitudes and behaviors are in the past. There are rich and complex relationships to the land, to storytelling, and each other in all of these practices. Participants were able to express a real sense of empowerment and an understanding that of not just systemic impacts of racism within healthcare settings, but also where they sit within those systems and how they might be able to respond. The combination of these elements left participants feeling grateful for this workshop and able to see themselves and their practice as being a part of change.
All right, what's next? We are exploring opportunities that will shift cultural connections into other communities, providing cultural safety and training in remote areas. We've also been in discussion with the College of New Caledonia to implement this as a permanent framework in their post-secondary institutions and for healthcare students and beyond. Moving forward with this project, we continue to present our research and workshop model in meaningful circles to hopefully expand this programming into the greater community.
Hi, everybody. The difficult closing slot. We'll do our best. I'm John. I'm regular faculty in communication design here at Carr. I have Jocelyn and Clara with me, who are research assistants on this project. This is actually a two-part project. So we're going to show most of part one tonight, which we did in the summer of 2021, and then we're currently engaged in part two of the project, which Clara and Jocelyn will speak to towards the end. So the guiding question of challenging stigma through storytelling. How might we amplify the voices of people with lived experience of mental health, substance use, and the criminal justice system, and hope to maybe reduce stigma around those topics? The partner on this project was the very catchily titled BC Mental Health Substance Use Services, or BCMHSUS, which I will get tongue-tied over as we go through this presentation, so you can count how many times I do that. They provide care services to people with complex needs, including severe and persistent mental health and substance use issues from across the province. So BCMHSUS approached the HDL about developing a series of videos that could amplify the voices of their service users, try and identify and reduce stigma they face when accessing those services. So this is a little bit of what our project looked like in terms of a timeline, approximately 6 months. We started broadly talking around a range of topics, storytelling. Key themes were identified through those sessions and then focused in on. Simultaneously, we were developing a visual language for the project and direction. There was iterative storyboarding development and a review and consultation process that went on to, and for that, finally, the quite heavy production and sign off of the project. I'm going to go into each of those stages now in a little bit more detail. The first element is the team formation. Here is our non-HDL team. In their Zoom windows, this was all done virtually in 2021 for obvious reasons. So BCMHSUS brought onto the project 2 strategic advisors. That would be Nicholas and Victoria. You can see in the bottom windows here, with lived experience to be part of recruitment, to help with the development of the sessions, the questions that we were asking during the storytelling, prompts, and to help facilitate the sessions too, and really to act as a bridge between the kind of gap in experience between the design team and the storytellers. So together with BCMHSUS, doing well so far, they recruited 3 storytellers, again, individuals with lived experience of substance use and mental health challenges. And those strategic advisors were amazing and were a key in the development of a comfort agreement too. So how we would engage in those sessions, considering factors such as safety, trust, privacy, and peer support. Not pictured here, but also a key member of our team who attended many sessions was Rosie Whitehelk as well, who was fantastic at grounding us in the sessions and kind of making us all kind of prepared to kind of go into some of the difficult conversations that we were going to have during the sessions. So yeah, we engaged in many storytelling sessions, around 6 or 7, 2 to 3 hour, I think they were at the time, storytelling sessions led by our strategic advisors. Stories shared through the sessions then went through this sorting process, which looks a little bit wild in the HDL, and themes that were emerging through that sorting process were then fed back to the group and discussed. The development of questions came through the emergence of those themes. There were many themes, there were many things that we could talk about through the project, but eventually 3 themes of importance were kind of homed in on as being key to their experience that we wanted to focus a series of videos upon. So the design team were then taking the transcripts, taking those pieces of stories and began storyboarding with those across the 3 videos, sharing versions of the storyboard as we went iteratively back to the larger team to ensure that we were accurately capturing the stories, and maybe we were adjusting things or recapturing things as we went along. So we were very much kind of being responsive to what we were hearing from the storytellers. We also engaged the storytellers in co-design workshops to inform the visual language of the videos. This included how they would be represented as characters. We made a choice quite early on not to use kind of documentary photography style and actually use our own kind of visual language constructed from scratch through illustration and graphic design. We were also considering the visual metaphors that we were using to expand on some of the themes that we were talking about. and that accompany the stories. And we were also very keen to avoid cliched depictions of mental health challenges, such as people with dark clouds over their head or people crouched in corners looking very depressed all the time. So trying to really kind of move away from a well-trodden path around mental health and substance use visually. Once everyone was happy with the audio and the storyboards, we entered a really intense production mode, not so intense for me, but very intense for the RAs who were drafting all those things. But I was sympathizing with them from the sidelines, offering emotional support. Again, sharing back progress on the videos as we went for feedback. And the 3 video themes are Stigma, Standing in the Gap, and the final video is Overcoming and Healing. And now I have to do a little bit of fancy footwork to get into YouTube, which I hope is still open. It's not gonna. It's coming in quick. Okay, got it. I got it. I got it. Someone else's laptop. It's most difficult. Okay, so this is part of video 3. I'm just going to play the first couple of minutes to give you a sense. So this is Overcoming and Healing. And should say as well that the intro music was written by one of our storytellers too, which is really nice.
Think that when I put drugs and alcohol down that I'm going to get better. It's really hard to explain to people that the things that I use to cope with reality and to cope with my own internal experience are also the things that are pathologically killing me and destroying my life. But that when you take those things away, everything on the outside might get better, but on the inside I get worse, because what I then have is an ostensibly untreated mental illness. I use drugs because of underlying mental illness. And I feel like drugs cause or exacerbate mental illness.
When I was first incarcerated, walking through those doors, I'm in handcuffs, and just realizing like what a mess my addiction has created in my life. I was faced with a decision. I either make steps towards the life that I want for myself or continue to numb the suffering. Part of that life that I want for myself is to be the parent that I know that I can be, to be available to my son, to model of resilience and a life that can take the worst circumstances and make something good out of it.
When I look at my recovery, I really have to think of it as like a train that runs down parallel tracks, and either one's going to take the other one out. So if I'm not focusing on my mental health, it's going to cause a relapse. And if I'm not focusing on my recovery from drugs and alcohol, I'm going to get worse in terms of my mental illness. These things have to be treated in tandem for me to have any kind of success.
I understand the heartache and the stress and the struggle from relapse, because even myself, like I'm in recovery right now, and it's crazy because like I used to go from being somebody who was accessing the services at the OPS, somebody that needed the help, to somebody that can help the people that need it.
I've relapsed more times than I could count on all the hands in this room, and I have a lot of shame about that. And I'm starting to learn that all of this was integral to my journey, to understanding my experience, to finding my voice, to letting go of some of the shame that I've had around what was really never a choice for me.
There's a saying that we have at the OPS with people that are accessing it. We say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's possible.
I said, okay, I'll try. It was like this tiny maybe that shifted everything for me. Maybe this time things could be different. And when I started to believe that, and I started to act like that, and the right people were put in my path at the right times, the right jobs, the right counselors, the right support, I started to get reinforced the idea like, this is it. This is your chance. The universe is giving you this. And like, you got to take it. You got to capitalize on it. And it became this like self-perpetuating loop of belief in myself. I had a lot of stories about going back to school, a lot of lack of belief that I could do it. The multiple times I've tried in the past have ended up with either suicide attempts or relapse or both. So I had a lot of fear, and yet I just did it scared. And I don't know why I managed to do it and I'm in it. Then at the same time, I look at my life right now and I'm like, I'm working and I'm in school and doing well at it. I know what my values are and I can live in alignment with them.
To the other one. What's that? It's been a while. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so next steps. We're working on part 2 of the project, phase 2, as I mentioned. So we're working with the families of people who have experienced mental health and substance use challenges. We're just at the kind of storyboarding stage, getting feedback on those now. Clara and Jocelyn are preparing themselves to kind of dig in on some heavy animation work in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll have those to share maybe via the HDL YouTube channel in a couple of weeks or a few months, where you can see the 3 videos in their entirety, if you like, as well. So I'm going to hand over to Clara and Jocelyn to just give you a sense of what they thought about the project, but I'd just like to finish by saying I feel super privileged to work in this project. It's been amazing to be part of it. I've learned so much. I feel very humbled by it as well, and such an amazing team on both phases of the project.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. Just to introduce myself once again, I'm Jocelyn, and I'm a 4th year communication design student. And this is Clara, and she's also a 4th year communication design student. So for the past 6 months, we've been working as research assistants. We've been working on the 2nd edition of this project this time around. We've been working closely together with the families of the people with mental health and substance use experiences through storytelling sessions. This time, we're working with 3 unique perspectives of a mother, a daughter, a sister, and we've been learning to identify ways we can respectfully represent, amplify, and honor the diverse voices of our storytellers and their loved ones.
Key learning that we wanted to share with you all, as John has already mentioned, is the importance of working closely with the storytellers, with strategic providers, and with the BC MHSUS team, just to ensure that the stories that we will share back are accurately represented, while also highlighting each individual's unique experiences, cultures, and perspectives. And although we're still very much in the production phase of things, we're really excited to share back the videos with you all in maybe a month.
Please look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Great, and I just wanted to give one more thank you to our storytellers from this round of the video, some of which were joining us in the audience today, for their bravery and trust in us to showcase their stories in the best way. And now for our production mode, I think a month is like optimistic. We're like feeling the sweat, but month and a half maybe, yeah. Great, so before we move to the kind of showcase peruse part, if you didn't have a chance earlier, did anyone have any questions for our project teams? We have a bit of time. Don't be shy. You can also come up to us later. That's better. All right. So just some closing notes. I wanted to also say a huge thank you to Atilia and Priyanka, who today would not be possible without, there you are, I'm like looking for you. So Atilia is the coordinator of the lab, and Priyanka has been doing our comms at the lab. They've both been working like tirelessly for weeks to put together these publications that you have to take home with you and to support with all the slides and setup. And a core member of our Health Design Lab team. So huge shout out and thank you to them. And also a big thank you to our research assistants who presented today. John, myself, and Kaylee are co-leading some of these projects, but as you can see, they wouldn't be possible without the research assistants on the projects. And it's like a key part of thinking about education in a slightly different way, as taking a part-time job through the lab, doing that as part of your undergrad or master's program, and then hopefully taking that knowledge and being like designers and researchers out in the world, hopefully working with some of the organizations that you're a part of. So we're really excited as kind of having that as a core kind of outcome of the lab of like raising our research assistants and in a slightly different way of like design research and kind of changing the momentum of what healthcare and the intersection of design is, hopefully in BC. So thank you to our research assistant. And we hope that you'll keep in touch with us. So there's a bit of info if you want to email us, check us out on Instagram and Twitter, or check out our website. We have our info there. We'd love to hear from you a little bit more. And if some time at the end, you can please come up to any of our research assistants, John and I. Kaylee's here from her mat leave, happy to maybe take questions too. And yeah, we have the next little bit if you want to stick around to take a look at the projects that we have on the two sides. So thank you so much for joining today and have a good evening.
Thank you.